Welcome to the 3D Players podcast, where we explore personalization in healthcare through advancements in 3D technology. We talk to leaders championing more predictable and sustainable patient care. I'm Sebastian de Boot and I'm joined by my co-host Pieter Slagmolen. Hey Peter.
Hey Sebastian.
At Restore 3D, we have it in our mission to expand the reach of personalized musculoskeletal care with additive manufacturing. Our solutions are as unique as the patients and surgeons we aim to assist because one size doesn't fit all. When a medtech startup puts that on its website, you can expect an invitation from the 3D Players podcast. And so we're very excited to have received a positive response from Cambre Kelly, the Chief Technical Officer of Restore 3D, to be our guest today. We're keen to understand her view on personalization and the impact startups are making to shake up the market. Welcome, Cambre.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Cambre, Restore 3D is still a bit of a new kid on the block. Can you tell us about the company? What should we know about Restore 3D?
So I think we're kind of a relatively small player in the space, but providing some very unique personalized solutions. The company was started in 2017 as a spin out of technology being researched at Duke University. So we're based here in Durham, North Carolina, and still stay very close to research efforts at Duke and other academic institutions. I think what makes us very unique for a business of our size is our ability to kind of go end to end. And for us, that means from preoperative CT scan all the way through final finished parts, both instruments and implants. And sometimes also anatomic models for a personalized solution for a given case. And so for us as a small business very early on, that was part of our ethos to insource and own a lot of design and the manufacturing processes in-house within the four walls of our production facility.
You talk about your PhD and your background at the university. Can you tell us a bit more about that specific research and how your academic career then evolved into creation of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I mentioned, some of the core technology of the business, what we call our tidal technology, which is our 3D printed porous lattice structure, was part of my doctoral research at Duke University. And since it's been continued by more students in that research group, which is the Gall Research Group at Duke. But that's kind of part of the core of our business is being very scientifically driven and evidence-based as an organization. We really wanted to understand from the very onset what the clinical problems were that orthopedic surgeons that we were partnering with were seeing in the clinic. Where were the gaps in kind of their toolkit and their ability to deliver good outcomes for their patients? And where could we plug in the scientific side, bring good basic research to the table, and understand the manufacturing process, the design processes, to be able to partner with them to provide these unique personalized solutions for each of their patients. So that's something that we're very proud of as a business. We continue to do work kind of at an academic collaboration level with Duke University. We also partner with Drexel University on biomechanics research. That's Soren Siegler's lab. And then we also do a lot of work with animal models with both Colorado State University and University of New South Wales to study our materials in vivo preclinical models. So it's something that, as a business, we continue to invest time and resources in to be able to publish data and be kind of thought leaders on the scientific side. And it's something we're very proud of.
Both me and Sebastian, we actually have a research background ourselves, but we never kind of exhibited or experienced the aha moment to realize that our research actually also had commercial value. Did you experience that aha moment, identifying, this really has value outside of the academic world?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a little bit of kind of my background that might shed some light on there. I'm a biomedical engineer by training, studied at Georgia Tech for undergrad and worked at a couple med device startups in the Atlanta area when I was there. And that was kind of my first exposure to orthopedics and medical device development, and always was very interested in kind of the translational opportunity, academic research, materials-based technologies to commercial products for better clinical solutions. And so when I joined the research group at Duke, that was the intention from the onset. The idea of doing research for not just for the sake of kind of publishing and advancing kind of one niche space of the field, but for thinking broader about the applications. And that's really what our research group strives to do. One of the great things about Duke and other universities that have large medical centers attached to them is that there's great collaboration between the clinical side and the engineering side. And so that was something that we benefited from very early on. Dr. Sam Adams, who's a foot and ankle specialist at Duke University, was actually on my thesis committee. So we had that kind of clinical perspective represented in the research from the very beginning. And that was something that was hugely valuable. I think the aha moment maybe came for us when we started looking at all of the different lattice structures that we could print with laser powder bed fusion. And at the time, one of the kind of first objectives of my research was to try to just print all the lattices that we could and, see to start what was actually printable, what worked, and then kind of start to narrow the funnel from there and look at mechanical properties, kind of in static compression, static tension, just kind of basic characterization work that really wasn't very robust in the literature at the time. And that was where we started looking at the gyroid structure, which is part of the triply periodic minimal surface family of architectures. First of all, they look really cool and different than kind of strut-based or truss-based lattice structures. And so from the very beginning, they're very appealing to the eye or just look unique with kind of the sheet-based architecture that they are. But then looking at the mechanical data just in static properties, we started being very interested in how they had higher performance for a given porosity relative to the other architectures that we were looking at as well. And then we moved into characterization in fatigue, and that's when the sheet-based architectures really pulled away as far as performance, given their ability to kind of homogenize loads and bear cyclic repetitive loading as compared to truss-based architectures that are, inherently flawed and have stress concentrations and don't stand up in fatigue in the same way. So that's where we started getting really excited. And that was probably where the aha moment came to us pretty early on in the research, really.
The tile technology is really built around the metal 3D printing side and the porous structures, as you explained. Now, within Restore 3D, you chose to apply this not just to any medical devices, but to personalized care. Where does that belief in the future of personalization come from?
Oftentimes, when we talk about the advantages of 3D printing in our space in medical and orthopedics specifically, we start out with two basic advantages, right? One is the ability to create complex porous architectures. Ours is tidal technology. We have great data that shows that, like I talked about, we have superior mechanical performance, but also superior bony ingrowth in those animal models that I mentioned. And then the second is the ability to create personalized devices using preoperative CT imaging to create a 3D model of the patient's anatomy and then work hand in glove with the surgeon to decide what's the correct surgical approach, what are the goals of the surgery for the patient, and to design a unique solution, which for us includes both implants and instrumentation for a given patient. So marrying those two advantages of being able to create that personalized design, not only to match the anatomy of the geometry, but then the surgeon and engineer being able to decide we want to have a porous ingrowth region here or an articulating region to maintain motion here is really one of the great advantages of the 3D design tools and then the 3D manufacturing processes that we have capabilities for. So that's something that we get really, excited about as an organization. One of the great things about the tidal technology being a sheet-based architecture is that it's both bulk and surface isotropy. And so when we apply it to kind of the organic surface of an anatomically matched geometry, we can apply it and then kind of cut the structure conformal to the surface, which is awesome because it gives us unlimited design freedom. Whereas other kind of strut-based architectures, you kind of have to play around with the nodes and make sure they all end at the right places if you've got kind of a curved anatomically matched surface. So for us, that's been a great benefit of the architecture because the engineers have, like I said, kind of unlimited design freedom when they're working with the surgeons to plan what's right for each patient.
Does that translate mostly into operational gains for your engineering team, or is there also a benefit then in the end for the patient?
I think it's a little bit of both. As we talk about personalization, I think one of the things we'll probably get into is the ability to make it scalable. And I think, we're not the only ones in the industry thinking about that, but certainly it's helpful when the engineers can decide with the surgeons where they want to put porous architecture and they don't have to think too much about going back and, like I said, kind of closing off those nodes or making sure there aren't kind of hanging struts or anything. It's something that's just kind of routine at that point, but certainly provides efficiency on the design side and on the manufacturing side as well, where we don't have to kind of think about different support structures or orientations or anything like that with the architecture. But then I think it does have, an inherent benefit for the patient, right? Because we can be creative as we want to be with the design. We're not limited into some artificial design envelope based on the manufacturability. And I think that that's hugely beneficial kind of downstream all the way to the patient as well.
So you describe how your technology has some unique benefits. At the same time, you're looking to solve real clinical problems. How does that work? Like, where do you go and look for those clinical indications? How does this process work for you?
I mentioned that part of working at Duke University gave us access to surgeons who are really on the cutting edge. And one of those is Sam Adams. And at the time, he was treating a lot of lower limb reconstruction case and limb salvage cases. And he was one of the early adopters of 3D printing. And was using some other solutions at the time and partnered with us to really kind of advance what he could provide for his patients. So him and some other early adopters were the ones that came to us and said, here are the places where I don't have any good solutions for my patients. And oftentimes, especially in the lower extremity where we kind of started out exploring solutions, was these are limb salvage cases and the alternative is a below the knee amputation. And so the ability to bring some innovation there and try something new is oftentimes what those thought leading surgeons are looking for. And their patients are willing to explore a new technology with them because they want to salvage, keep their limb. And so those were really the kind of really hard, complex reconstruction cases that we started out with. In the lower extremity. And then kind of as we got the design platforms and the manufacturing platforms established, expanded out into other areas of indication, some kind of complex reconstruction in the lower extremity, like I mentioned, as well as upper extremity, some trauma indications, pelvis reconstruction for orthopedic oncology, kind of cutting all across the body. And we've seen a lot of opportunity to, again, provide solutions where surgeons are really kind of lacking good options for these patients that have kind of difficult pathologies and anatomies to provide good solutions for.
One of the observations that we have from looking at your portfolio is that rather than focus on the more high volume, very large joint applications, you're looking more at like smaller indications like spine, maybe extremities or ankle. Why did you make that choice?
Yeah, it's a good question. Starting in lower extremity, again, was really driven by the clinical need and some experience that our founding team had from other businesses kind of working in that space and the kind of surgeon network that we were familiar with at the time, and really just kind of being drawn in by the ability to provide solutions where surgeons were turning to allograft or worst case to BKAs. And then we've seen kind of these other niche opportunities, upper extremity, for example, and other kind of complex reconstructions, and really been able to deliver a unique solution where there aren't others in the market. And so for us, that's been, as a small business, a really good opportunity to play in the extremities space or other places where there isn't a lot of entrenched competition. I think the large joint space, hips and knees, has definitely seen some benefit to personalization, but where you have a lot of large volume there, you also have a lot of competition in the landscape and pricing pressure, at least here in the US, for kind of continuing to drive down costs in that space. And so we feel very excited about kind of continuing to develop out and scale our platform and our capabilities in the extremities space and some of the other kind of smaller markets before trying to jump into some of the large joint spaces.
Makes a lot of sense. I think this also explains, I guess you recently received FDA clearance for patient-specific resection guides to use with a total ankle system. Can you explain a bit more about this product and how it came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of kind of background to set that up. We acquired a business called Kinos Medical back in 2021. That business had developed the Kinos Axiom total ankle replacement system, which is a unique total ankle replacement in that it allows for range of motion in all three anatomic planes, so a more natural kinematic total ankle. And so we were very excited about that technology when we acquired it and that team. And I mentioned before, the basic research came out of an elite biomechanic research group at Drexel University and was very well studied and understood. And again, that was kind of part of the attraction there, in that they had great basic science kind of foundation, and that paralleled with kind of our thoughts in that space. At the time when we had purchased the company, that system was traditionally manufactured with a plasma spray coated implant. And so the thesis behind bringing the Kino system into Restore 3D was to apply their kind of biomechanical technology and articulating surface, and then layer that in with our additive manufacturing capabilities and our title technology to bring a 3D printed implant to market. So we have brought the 3D printed tibial and talar components to market with title technology. And then, like you mentioned, we recently received FDA clearance for our patient-specific resection guide, which is a patient-specific kind of cutting guide, cut-through guide, that is an all-metal guide for surgeons to place onto the bone and guides them to make their saw blade resection on both the tibial side and the talar side of the ankle joint complex, and then use kind of the rest of the traditional instrumentation to proceed with the surgery. And so, again, that starts with preoperative planning based on CT from every patient, and then the surgeon working hand in glove with our engineers to kind of decide what they want to achieve for the patient. If there's a lot of correction that needs to be made due to deformity or, other considerations, they work through that all together to provide the best possible outcome for the patient.
We'll talk about scalability in a second, but on that ankle system, you mentioned already your guide is printed in metal, not in plastic, which is probably more typical for guide systems. So why did your team choose metal in this case, which may be more difficult to scale?
It probably seems like a non-obvious choice, but for us, it's something that we're very excited about, to have a differentiated offering on the market. Like you said, most of the guides for total ankle replacement systems are polymer patient-specific guides, and most of them are printed, using SLS technologies. What we understood from speaking with those kind of thought-leading surgeons that had some experience using other systems was that those polymer guides had a lot of issues related to kind of rigidity, and that they weren't registering in the best way for all of their cases. There was kind of a lot of variability in whether or not that patient-specific surface would actually kind of match, kind of click on, for lack of a better word, to the anatomy with a high level of confidence. And then also that they, the polymer guides just aren't rigid. And so when they, started to kind of cut through them or proceed with the surgery, there was kind of, they would flex and maybe not provide the most accurate cuts. And so for us, we wanted to deliver something that had a higher level of confidence, not only from the registration of the guide, but also from the ability to be confident that the cut that you're making is the cut that you want to be making. And so metal was kind of the right option, given, our in-sourced capabilities. We've developed kind of a streamlined process to deliver those guides in a quick turnaround time, and hopefully be able to scale them up as the demand for that offering increases as we get into full launch in the summer.
Right, makes much more sense now, and it really comes from a clinical or mechanical need, so makes a lot of sense. Let's switch gears to scalability, as we previously already alluded on. Maybe first, from your portfolio perspective, which of the products that you have today do you think has the biggest potential to scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a little bit about our portfolio. I mentioned the Kino's total ankle replacement system that we're very excited about and have done a lot of work kind of collaboratively in our team, like I said, to convert the traditionally manufactured implants to 3D printed, to provide the patient-specific resection guide, which is really valuable tool for the surgeons intraoperatively. And so we're very excited about that product portfolio and the ability for not only great clinical outcomes, but the ability for it to really become a flagship product and scale with the organization. I think about the other products in our lower extremity portfolio, and we're trying to build out a bag of products that offer a continuum of care for these patients. So when you think about kind of primary total ankle replacement, all the way through end stage limb salvage procedures that I've mentioned a couple times. And so there's some great products in the pipeline that will kind of offer that continuum of care depending on where the patient is. And so we get very excited about that. We do have some products in the spine space. I think 3D printing was quickly adopted in spine. If you think of kind of all the different markets in orthopedics, spine was one of the early adopters of printing technology. And I think that's something where our title technology is a differentiated solution. But we also offer 3D printed disposable single-use instrument kits for spine, which I think is something that is becoming more and more of an opportunity, particularly in the ASC market for spine. So our interbody solution for cervical is accompanied by, single-use instrument pack. And I think that's something that will unlock the ability to kind of scale those procedures to higher volumes in those ASC settings. And that's something that we're pretty excited about with our cervical solution and soon our lumbar solution as well. So yeah, I think we're pretty excited overall. We're not going to, kind of be predisposed to trying to scale any one vertical. One of the great things about owning everything from end to end is that we can kind of scale up where we're seeing the market pull, as opposed to trying to push our technology onto the market. And that's something that has been really beneficial for us that we'll continue to look at over the next few years.
All right, so there's clearly a very nice pipeline of interesting products to scale. Now, from your experience so far, what has been the biggest blocker for the adoption of personalized medical devices?
I think that there's probably a couple things that I can point to, some related to kind of technology readiness, and some of that has been things that we've felt here in the organization as we've been trying to stand up our production facility. I think maybe a misconception of those that are not super familiar in operating the metal printers in the space is that they're plug and play. And that's certainly not the case. We did a ton of work to develop the parameter sets and the process that we use to print our titanium and our cobalt chrome products. And there was a lot of effort to optimize that for our given applications. And so that certainly was something that we had to figure out from a very early standpoint. There's a lot of questions around quality system and traceability and other sorts of things related to personalized implants, which is something that most medical device manufacturers are not really set up to do lots with batch size of one. Or one or two or three, right? If you're going to provide a couple in the OR as backup. And so that's something that we have spent a ton of time thinking through very carefully to set up a process, not only on the design and the manufacturing side, but also on the documentation side to support the traceability of these parts and produce good quality parts through our system. And again, that's something that I think is not universal, and everyone's trying to kind of figure this out in their own isolated vacuum. So that's kind of on the technology side and maybe kind of the quality system side. And then I think we just need kind of better overall collaboration between industry and academics and the regulatory agencies. And some of that's being facilitated through some of the standards organizations right now. I'm part of ASTM's F42 subcommittee for medical device. And so working, directly with Matt DePrima from the FDA and others to try to provide, more clarity on what the expectations are and more standardization around these kind of products and processes to bring more innovation to the market as quickly as we can.
You talk a lot about some of the internal challenges with scaling this up and first of all developing a qualitative personalized product and bringing this to the market. Anything to add maybe from the surgeon's perspective? If he has the choice between ordering a standard device versus anything patient specific, are there any challenges related to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably the biggest one is just education on the technology for surgeons that haven't been exposed to it. Trying to educate them on what the technology is and how that works. And one of our favorite things to do is to bring surgeons to our facility and walk them through the production process. And when they see the printers and see the lasers going and the layers going one over the other, it kind of almost becomes an aha moment where they think, oh, wow, there really is kind of this unlimited design freedom. And that's when the surgeon and the engineer collaborating gets super exciting and creative. But obviously, that's a very tough thing to kind of scale up. And so trying to provide just more education all around, working with, the KOLs that have been early adopters of the technology to publish their clinical data, to be on the podium, sharing their experience with the design process and the products and their patients with their peers has been kind of the best way that we've seen to be able to kind of unlock kind of educational aspect as well.
You're obviously a startup, and a lot of companies driving personalization in the market are also startup and smaller companies. How do you convince physicians to choose your products over those of much more known, established market players that are out there?
I think when they're scratching their head and wanting better solutions for their patients, it's not too hard of a sell. And we've been very lucky to have a lot of market pull. And like I said, a lot of this kind of peer-to-peer education where one surgeon who's worked with us will refer us to, their partner or their peer in the space that's also struggling to come up with solutions. And I think for surgeons, like I said, it's kind of that educational piece or that kind of getting through the first case where they learn a lot, and maybe it takes a little bit more time on their first design call with the engineer to kind of understand the 3D model and talk through what they want to do. But then after they kind of get through the first repetition of a case, they think, oh, okay, I learned a little bit. I did the surgery, what I thought was going to work didn't quite work, or I learned something new, and then they come back to the engineer, and then it becomes this great kind of virtuous loop where the surgeon is bringing great clinical perspective, the engineer is bringing great design perspective, and then they've kind of, snowballed to these great solutions. And so, like I said, we've been very lucky to have a lot of market pull because we've worked in these spaces where there aren't a lot of solutions, and some of the larger players in the space, aren't really offering products for the indications that we're working on.
It seems like you're delivering fun as well to the physician, the way that you describe it.
Yeah, I think it's a really awesome collaboration for the surgeon and some of our engineering team. I think they get along really well and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. It's been a really awesome opportunity for us to connect with those surgeons and have a lot of really great conversation from both sides.
Is that also how you tackle the variety in end customers that you have as a company? Because you have a quite broad portfolio. Is it the combination of science and basically mouth-to-mouth or word-to-word, or how do you describe that, marketing and sales? Is that what allows you to tackle such a broad variety of customers?
Yeah, we have a great commercial team, but they're pretty small but mighty. But yeah, we benefit a lot from their expertise, but also from, like I said, the peer-to-peer aspect of it. And I think as the 3D printing technology is kind of percolated through lower extremity and now upper extremity and other spaces, it's, kind of a hot buzz topic at the large orthopedic meetings and something that people are kind of looking for the right first case. They're interested in the technology. They're kind of keeping, as they're going through their clinic thinking, is there a patient out there in my practice that is kind of the right patient to try out the technology on? And I think that's been very exciting as we've kind of seen kind of more organic adoption of the technology kind of all across the portfolio.
So you really nicely described the importance of this synergy between the engineers and the physicians and, the collaboration and finding a good solution for the patients. At the same time, you as a company also recently launched an online platform for ordering your products and devices. How should we look at those next to each other? You have the personal interaction, but then also the digital interaction to streamline things. How do you look at that in combination?
Yeah, for sure. So our platform is called R3ID. We launched that last fall, and it's essentially a surgeon-facing platform, both web-based and then also iOS and Android apps for a surgeon to kind of track and manage their cases through our process. And so it goes kind of hand in hand with that very personalized experience between the surgeon and the engineer that I described. But it is a tool that allows for direct and secure upload of the preoperative imaging data and any other information that we need to kind of, initiate a case and get started. And then helps them, schedule their design call, provide comments or feedback, look at the design plan that we provide, and then kind of move through the patient-specific process that we facilitate in a platform that it's all right there. And so for surgeons that do a lot of work with us and that have kind of multiple cases in flight any given time, they can kind of see what cases and, which part of the status, and they get notified when we need, information from them or when the ball is in our court and things like that. And then, the other kind of major benefit that we've seen is that it now is acting as kind of an archive for surgeons. And so they can go back and look at their past cases, whether they just want to refer back to it as they're thinking about maybe a next patient that might be, a candidate for something similar, or when they're thinking about pulling together a case series or putting a presentation or something like that together. All the information for the cases that they've done with us are all right there and accessible to them at any time. And so that's been a huge benefit and something that surgeons have been very excited about with the platform rolling out.
One of the things you mentioned as what makes your company unique is the fact that you kind of own the entire process end to end, which is fantastic. Can you explain what benefit does this provide to you and why is this relevant?
So for us, we think about a couple of things as it relates to owning the process end to end. One of those is the ability to kind of move quickly for any given case. And so we have control over the queues more or less. And so whether that's kind of the inbound queue of converting the CT to the 3D model, so we can start the design plan, working through the design with the surgeon and moving as quickly as they want to move through the design, but then also kind of the manufacturing processes as well. So we endeavor to kind of hold to lead times somewhere around 6 to 8 weeks for most cases, and then kind of depending on complexity or urgency, kind of speed up or sometimes kind of slow down if we need to do something for a more complex reconstruction. And so that gives us a lot of flexibility and agility, on kind of the process side. It also allows us to control costs in a way that is very important for us as a small business. And then I think the other probably softer aspect of it is that having the manufacturing process and the design process all in-house enables our engineering team and our operations team to work very closely together, and for the engineers that are designing parts to be able to turn to their colleagues on the manufacturing side and, kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And so we benefit a lot from kind of doing R&D work on the same systems that we're doing production runs on. And so we see kind of a lot of very early on as we iterate through design, the ability to kind of move more quickly through design iterations. And for, again, that kind of, tribal knowledge in the team to benefit the design as we're kind of making personalized products and thinking through support strategy and orientation and design for additive manufacturing internally. So that's something that I think has been hugely beneficial to us as well.
You mentioned speed a number of times and the ability to change. You talk about agility at one point in time. How important is that agility for a startup company?
It's hugely important. I think for us, one of the great things that we've been able to offer to our surgeon customers is the ability to move relatively quickly compared to some of the other lead times in the industry. And, that's something that is tough as we kind of scale up, and has certainly been kind of a growing pain that we're experiencing now and continuing to kind of work through and endeavoring to be, better and faster every day. But the ability to be able to be not only reactive to kind of changing priorities, but, sometimes being proactive where we can and remaining agile around what we have going on any given week is hugely important to us as a business.
Let's maybe look forward. If you project yourself 5 years into the future, what do you expect will be the 2 or 3 trends that you believe will have the biggest impact on personalization?
I think one thing that we've thought a lot about as a business is, and we've talked a little bit about here, is scalability. And I think that that's probably one of the trends that we're going to start to see. And really going to pressure test. It's going to be make or break. Can we do this in a scalable way, in a cost-effective way? And I think that's one of the things that, again, not only, here at Restore 3D, but others in the industry are thinking about. And we're going to have to solve those problems industry-wide. I think the other thing that we're very excited about and have been doing a lot of work thinking through here is kind of how do you connect more directly to the patient? And I think that it's something that has always seemed a little bit funny to us where we're creating these incredibly personalized solutions. And the engineer and the surgeon have a great collaboration. But ultimately, the end customer is the patient. And in orthopedics, we're, in a patient satisfaction business, right? We're trying to improve pain, improve function. That's really ultimately the goal is, patient satisfaction at the end of the day, post-operatively. And so we have some really early stage projects that we're very excited about to be able to connect directly to the patient, educate them on the technology and the procedure that they're going to receive, but then also to be able to track outcomes from them from baseline, preoperatively, through post-operative follow-up to understand, how are they doing? Are they satisfied with the procedure? Has their pain been reduced? Is their function improved? And really understand, the outcomes related to these devices, which is something that's very unique to do in the personalized space where inherently every device is different. And so doing robust clinical research becomes a little bit more nuanced in this space. But, I think that patient interaction directly is something that I think we're going to see more and more companies be interested in. And here at Restore 3D, we're pretty excited about that opportunity to do that with our patients.
And how are the patients reacting to this?
Yeah, we haven't gotten all the way to MVP level or anything like that. But from what we understand of what's going on in some of the other large joints markets and things like that, there's a lot of opportunity to provide patients with more, empower them with more information, whether that's kind of education around what's happening perioperatively for their surgery, but then also what's happening postoperatively. How are they recovering relative to other patients that have received the same procedure in the same kind of cohorts, more or less? And I think when I think about if I needed to have an orthopedic procedure, I'm a pretty competitive person. I would want to make sure that I'm recovering as well as some other people that are similar to me, if not better, right? And I think that that's only going to inherently drive better post-operative protocols and hopefully better recovery and outcomes for patients long term. But again, I think that that's something that as an industry, we're going to start to see more of and kind of figure out where to provide the most value to patients as the end customer.
Absolutely. As a closing remark, we should be grateful that startup companies as yours are bringing new innovations that can positively disrupt the medical device industry. Do you have any advice for people who might want to start to innovate in the market?
For us, and something that I've always kind of thought through is start with the clinical problem. And I think one of the most important things is to have a clinical perspective and, a team of key opinion leaders from early on in the process, and something that having a market pull from solving the clinical problem with your unique innovative solution is very important. And I think that that's probably more important than having some huge total addressable market or a ton of IP or anything else. You really have to be able to find a problem that you can solve and have surgeons that are excited about the solution and want to develop it with you. I think that from my experience has been the most fruitful, as opposed to developing the technology in isolation on the benchtop and then trying to explain to a surgeon why the technology is so much better than what they're currently using. That's kind of a harder sell, oftentimes, to convert them from something that they're generally already happy with. But if you can find the pain points and the places where they're pulling their hair out and they're frustrated and then provide a solution to that, that's kind of the easy sell normally, and where they get very excited to work with small companies like ours. So yeah, I think that would be kind of my big overall suggestion.
That's a wonderful closing remark. Thanks a lot for joining us, Cambre. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Really, really enjoyed it too.
Our 3 key takeaways from this conversation today are: first, personalized products, when they deliver value, they sell themselves, especially to surgeons who are pulling their hair out with a problem they're facing. Second, if you start your company with the clinical end in mind and work very closely with the clinicians on delivering value, that's a great starting point. And third, invest in-house in capabilities end-to-end, because that will allow you to scale up in a natural way as your company grows and your product reach the market in a broader fashion. We appreciate you sharing your insights with us on 3D Players, a podcast where we explore trends, insights, and innovations in personalized and sustainable healthcare. We were your hosts, Pieter Slagmolen and Sebastian de Boot. Thank you for listening, and join us for the next edition.